Guys, welcome back to the one and only me and these wonderful videos that I'm taking the time to record for you so that you can sit at home in the privacy of your own bedroom and watch me at all hours of the night. So in the previous video, we talked about labels, and we discussed a little bit about what goes onto a label, or at least what should go onto a label for someone like you when you get ready to use that chemical to kind of regard and look at and become familiar with some of the maybe hazards that are associated with that compound. So we listed maybe a set of 5 different things that we should look out for that is somewhat of a requirement, right? And I told you in this video what we would do is that we would go back and we would review some more terminology, some words that you might see stamped onto the label itself. So if you have the textbook, I first want to tell you that you need to go to Chapter 3, 134, and you need to look at this table of definitions. There's tons of different words that are listed, and the majority of them I think you probably have encountered at some point in time along the way. But there's a couple that I'm going to pluck out of this list, and I'm just going to state them here on the screen so that way for sure we know what these terms mean. Now granted, you might know what some of these mean already, and if so, then that's fine. You're a step ahead of the gang of everyone else. But these are words that we're going to encounter that we want to pay special attention to. All right, so the first one is going to be a carcinogen. carcinogen, carcinogen. So if this term appears on a label, what that means is that chemical can cause cancer. So that's bad, right? We don't want to expose ourselves to carcinogens. And there's going to be a point in time in our laboratory where you will be working with chemicals that are known carcinogens. So we want to make sure that you are handling those the proper way. So, of course, that requires goggles, that could require a fume hood, it would require the proper gloves, it would require a lab coat, all of the PPE equipment that you've seen before, that we've talked about before already, would show up in this case. And actually, a lot of these that we're getting ready to list, that would be the same case. All right? So a carcinogen is bad. When you see that word on the label, that basically means it can cause cancer, and that's something that you want to really pay special attention to when you handle it and when you use it in a lab. The next one, cryogen. A cryogen. All right, so what does that mean? Well, that means that this is stored and maybe even used at extremely low temperatures. We're talking about way, way, way below zero here. So these things are kept super cold. The reason is because they might become unstable at room temperature. Sometimes you might have to use them in super cold temperatures, so that requires a little bit of creativity on our part in a laboratory in order to successfully use those. But these compounds we want to pay special attention to. We want to make sure that they are stored in the proper way. We want to make sure that they're being used in the proper way. And because they are super cold, you can imagine what that would feel like if it gets on your skin. So we also want to handle those a certain way as well. Next one is called a lacrimator. 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 Okay, so what is a lacrimator? This might be a new term for you. What this means is it causes you to tear up. Think of an onion. The molecules and compounds in an onion, they're lacrimators. So if you're in the kitchen and you're cutting and chopping up that onion and those fumes in a way are getting inside of your eyes, then you're immediately going to get red eye and you're probably going to start crying because of it. It's going to burn. So these are lacrimators, and we have plenty of different types of lacrimators in a laboratory that can do that with you. So if an onion can do it, don't be surprised that a normal chemical can do it as well. So that is a lacrimator. The next one, you X-Men fans, mutagens. Mutagens basically go and it changes your DNA. That's pretty powerful. Now, we're probably not going to be a Cyclops or a Jean Grey or the Beast, but it can go in and it can modify the DNA strand, and it can cause a hiccup in it. And when the DNA begins to replicate itself, or when the DNA begins to reproduce in a way, if you want to think of it that way, there's going to be a glitch. There's going to be an error in that strand or that part of the DNA strand. And that can cause serious problems later on when your body needs to go through and replicate it. The next one is a teratogen. And this basically is going to go in and it's going to modify or danger defects in babies. Or fetus. Same thing. So this compound, if you are pregnant, can actually go in and change and modify DNA in a way to create birth defects in babies. This could be extra fingers. It could be the stump or growth, alteration of limbs like arms and legs. A number of different things can come from these teratogens that we might see in a laboratory. And finally, the last one that I want to bring in is the word toxic, and that means it's very bad on health effects. So we're talking about liver, we're talking about kidney, we're talking about stomach, you name it, major organs that we have. These toxic chemicals can attack those organs and basically shut them down. So these are just a couple of terms that you might see on chemical labels that might be out there, and I don't want any of these terms to basically throw you for a loop. Again, you've got a longer list that's going to be in your textbook. If you don't have the textbook, then maybe you can photocopy that list from someone else. I think that you are okay with the rest of these words, but these are going to be the most common. These are going to be some of the ones that we want to watch out for, and I'm going to put a special focus on these terms that you're seeing on the screen. Okay, something else that we talked about with labels. We said that labels very often have what we call a pictogram. And this was part of HAZCOM requirements. And we said that there are a number of different pictograms. So these pictograms are going to be divided up in a couple of different ways. And we want to start taking a look at them, and we want to make sure that we understand what these pictograms might be. So the first one is going to be given to any type of health hazard. The second one is going to be some type of flame to let you know that the stuff can catch on fire. The next one is an exclamation mark. We'll talk about what those mean in just a second. Number 4 is a corrosive. We said that eats away stuff most of the time. Number 5 is an exploding bomb. I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but we'll look at that one in just a second as well. Number 6 is some type of flame that's over a circle. So we'll look at that one. Number 7 is a gas cylinder. Number 8, skull and crossbones. Number 9, we have the environment. Out of all 9 of these, there are 28 classifications. Meaning that in each one of the 9 that you're seeing up above, that 9 can be broken down into smaller sections. And we can kind of classify these in more detail. And those smaller sections, if you add them all up, there's going to be 28 in total. So 28 classifications come from the 9 pictograms that we have listed up on top. There's also a rating system. So not only does the pictogram mean something, and not only does the classification mean something, but there's a rating system that's involved in these as well. And this rating system can either be numbers, or it can be letters, or it can be a combination of both of them. All right, don't let that throw you for a loop. 1 and A are the most hazardous. Those are the ones that you want to watch out for. They are the most hazardous. Think of it as giving it priority. If we give it priority, we put it first. So, of course, number 1 is going to be more hazardous than number 2, which is more hazardous than number 3, and so forth. And the same thing happens with the letters. A is the priority. So A is the most hazardous of them all, and then B not as hazardous, C not as hazardous as B, and all the way down the line. So that's the ranking system or the rating system, and those are the classifications. And ladies and gentlemen, these are the 9 symbols that you might see. So they're all up on the screen for you. If you look at the top one, that kind of pictogram, if you see it on a chemical label, basically means that this stuff can explode. And I don't think that you need to understand English to look at this picture and maybe think about explosion. So it doesn't really matter how literate you are in a way. These symbols, anyone should understand and kind of know what we're trying to basically relay information-wise about a chemical itself. This one is the picture of flammability. So that means that this stuff can catch on fire, right? You want to make sure that you keep these away from the flame. If you do have to heat these up, just make sure that you use maybe alternative forms of heat other than an open flame. And if you have to use flame, then you want to take special precaution to make sure that these things don't basically catch on fire with you. This next one, the circle with the flame, that's kind of how we listed it in our notes just a second ago. This is what we would call an oxidizer. You can kind of see the O for oxygen in there, and that basically means that these are oxygen sources in a way that if given the right circumstances, these things can catch on fire and blow up. They're very, very reactive, and we just want to take special precaution. And to tell you the truth, these are typically stored in their own area. So we group all of our oxidizers together. We keep them separate from everything else. They have their own designated location, and that's typically what you would find in a working laboratory as well. Next, corrosive. See up here at the test tubes, it looks like one's getting poured maybe on just a piece of metal, and the other one's getting poured onto your hand. So corrosive basically means it's going to eat away, and there's going to be some reactivity here that you want to be very careful with. Next is compressed gases. Why is compressed gases such important? Because these are under pressure and the gas tanks can blow up. So if it is a compressed gas, you want to make sure that you don't get these gas cylinders in presence of a flame or into a hot atmosphere. It's like throwing a canned hairspray into an open flame. Imagine what that will do. You can create a blow up if that begins to happen. Next one are the skull and crossbones. That represents poison and toxic. So again, if you're choosing a chemical that has this pictogram onto the label, you want to understand that you shouldn't be breathing that stuff in. You should not get it onto your skin. You shouldn't get it near your mouth. And if you do get some type of exposure with it, you need to make sure that you clean it off extremely well before you spread that poison, toxic chemical to someone else. Next one is a health hazard. The health hazard is really in particular focusing on the internals. So for instance, this is going to be stuff that's really bad for your liver, really bad for your heart, really bad for your respiratory system, your kidneys, whatever the case is, those are going to be the health hazards. Those health hazards are typically stored in a separate area of the laboratory as well. We group all of our health hazards together, we put them in one location, and we lock them up. So that way it's not in our general chemical stock. The next one is an alert. That just means that there's something that you should pay attention to with this chemical. It doesn't quite fit in any of the other 8 categories in a way, and because of that, that exclamation mark just really means take a look at the SDS. They want to make you aware of something, but they can't make a pictogram for every single thing, for every single chemical. So if it doesn't quite fit one of these 8, then number 9, or the alert, basically tells you go look at the SDS and figure out what is so weird or special about this chemical. And finally, the environmental hazard. You're seeing that in the bottom right-hand corner. It's a dead fish and a dead tree. So again, I think the picture kind of says it all. These types of compounds you want to dispose of the proper way. Just don't dump them down the drain and let them go out of the building. If you do, then it's probably going to poison the water supply. It's going to kill aquatic life. It can kill basically plant life. Whatever the case is, something nasty is going to happen to the environment. So again, dispose of them the proper way and you'll be okay. A while ago, I referenced to you some of the terminology. I've got some of the terminology here. If you do not have the textbook, then you're more than welcome to maybe pause this video and write down some of these words and some of the definitions. But you're going to see this is the list that we pulled the carcinogen and all of the other terms away from. So you're more than welcome to pause, write some of these down, and that way you'll know what they mean. But again, I pulled out the most important ones. I pulled out the ones that you should pay attention to the most. And I think that if you study those and remember those, you'll be okay. Here's just a continuation of that list from before. Remember, I said some of these you already know what they are. So we look at explosive or flammable or inflammable or non-flammable, an irritant. I think all of those are pretty much common sense. You know what those would mean if I gave them to you just normally out of the blue. Here are some others. Reactive, a self-heating substance. Come on, give me a break, right? You kind of know what those mean. But again, pause these, write these down, read the definitions if you need to, just to make sure that you're okay with them. And then finally, here are some others that finish out the list. Even water reactive. Give me a break. If you have never seen water reactive and I said, this chemical is water reactive, what does that mean? Well, it reacts with water. Again, it's not rocket science. All right. Okay, so that's where I'm going to stop. And in the next video, we'll continue on with this labeling stuff. And we'll talk about what's important and what's not important and maybe some more things to watch out for. So come back and listen to me a little bit more. This portion of the lecture module is almost finished, but not quite.